Hello, this is Mike at GameFromScratch. Welcome back to our ongoing Defold game engine series. Today we're actually going to cover a topic I completely missed while covering the basics of Defold, and that's UI or GUI programming. So we're going to look at creating a very simple user interface in the Defold game engine. Now I do want you to keep in mind that this is only going to scratch the surface of what is actually possible. There's a lot of things we're not getting into, such as Z-buffering or layers, anchoring, resolution independent UIs, animations, that kind of stuff. So there's way more than we're going to cover here, but we are going to get the basic workflow down, and from that you should be able to extrapolate just about whatever you need to know to follow along or to make a more complex user interface for yourself. Now I've already done this in text form. I will link this down below, and this includes all of the code we're about to go through. So if you miss out a little bit of the code I do, don't worry, it's available on GameFromScratch. I will link it down below. So without further ado, let's jump right in. We're going to create a very simple UI, basically just a label saying click this button, a button with the text basically click me, and then what we're going to do is have that user interface show when the user hits escape and then hide when they hit the button, and that's it. So really it's a very simple UI going forward, but it should cover most of what you need to know. Now first off, before we get things too far, we're going to need a font to get too far along in this, so let's just make a fonts folder like so. And we'll just add a font to it. I have one here on my desktop. It's a standard TTF file. I pulled it from Windows font folder, which by the way is totally not legal to redistribute. Totally legal to use. You have a license for this as part of your Windows install, but you do not have a redistributable license. But don't worry, there are thousands upon thousands of royalty TTF fonts available out there, but do realize that fonts are in fact covered by licenses. Okay, so we do have the TTF file enabled. Now we're just going to go ahead and create a font file. We shall dub the myfont.font, and we just select the font we just chose. Now if you go to this selector box, you'll notice there's no actual wildcard defined for fonts, which is kind of annoying, but just type asterisk TTF and you'll see your font that you added. Go ahead and add it in, and we're just going to jack the size up a little bit. We'll go with 30. And there's a preview of the font we just created. Now, if you want your fonts to be bigger or smaller, you have to actually control them using this size modifier. So do be aware of that. There's no ability to set the font size later on when creating your UI. All right, so we now have our font. Let's continue on. So the next thing we're going to need is a couple of input bindings. So you're going to control your, first off, the displaying of our GUI using the escape key, and then the actual actions of clicking the GUI. And if both of those, we actually need to define all of our events. Now this is actually how I've done this in an earlier tutorial. I assume you've already gone through it. So if you're struggling a bit with how to create the input mappings here, do refer to that earlier tutorial. I'm not going to go into any details about what I'm covering here, but it's already created for you. So the game input binding, we're just going to go ahead and create a trigger, a key trigger. My mouse is sticking. All right, so we're going to bind to the escape key, which now I need to find. Up. Okay. If these were in alphabetical order, it would make life a lot easier. All right, so key escape, and we shall name the escape. So now we are basically going to get sent an event when someone hits the escape key. We're also going to do one for left clicking. So add mouse trigger. So default is mouse button 1, which is your left mouse button, and our action is left_click. All right, so done with that, save that out. So now we have our input bindings and we have our font. Next thing we need to do is go ahead and actually create our GUI object. We're going to do everything out of main today. A little sloppy, but so open up main, like so, and then we're just going to right click on main, new, and GUI file, like that. And we will be calling it my GUI, and as you notice here, it's a .gui file. Simple enough, and you'll notice it's got its own editor. You can see the standard, here's the origin of 0 and 0 for X and Y axes. There's a Z axis as well, which is used a little bit for the depth stuff, the layering stuff that we're not going to get into here. But you can see your standard layout. So the bottom left corner is in fact right there. And your layout of your GUI is going to correspond by default to the layout of the game object you consume it in. And it's basically just composed of a bunch of nodes, textures, fonts, etc. So you see over here we can create boxes, texts, pie, template, and spine nodes. Now spine is a 2D IK based animation system. It's what allows you to create more advanced animated fancy UIs way beyond the scope of what we're going to cover today. In fact, all we are going to do today is create a box, put some text in it, and then another independent label with text in it. But first we need to map, oops, I don't even know what I just clicked there. We're going to bring our font in. So this is basically a replication of work. I don't know why you need to define a font in the GUI and then a font within your application, but you do. So bind that guy in. All right, so we now have our font available. And let's just go ahead and create our box first. We'll go with the standard sizing. And you'll see you can use the standard Q to select, W to translate. And we'll just move this guy over here. Say there. I want to change my game project too. Set the default size down a little bit. 640 for you wait. All right, 480. So default window is a little bit smaller. So here we go. There's our button, and then inside of our button, or as a child of our button, I want to create our label. And you can see if we move now the button, the label moves with it. So child automatically inherits the positioning data from their parent. And you'll notice there's an error message in this guy, but we'll fix that in a second. So basically it's saying it's font not found. So we define it, we'll sync it onto our button, come down here to the properties. You can see we can set the font right there. So just click it, select my font, and we're going to do the text as click me, like so. And the last thing I'm actually going to do in this particular case, so I'm going to set the color of the, oops, zoom mode. We'll go with fit. I didn't actually mean to change that. Let's scroll here, so we get to color. And we will make this guy red. So again, if you want this text to be bigger, you're going to have to update it, the font itself, to change the font. So why are you still giving me a not found file? Oh, save. Right, save that, click over here, there, and now it's updated. Let's position it inside of our box. So there is our button now. And we're just going to do one more label that is not a child here. So just go add text. This guy is now called text2. And we shall make it, okay, my mouse is being really finicky. Blue, like so. Again, we got to set the font for this guy. And then our text is click the button to close. All right. And again, we will just position this guy here. All right, so there is our GUI. Very simple, very easily added. Now we need to go ahead and actually add a tad bit of logic. Now what we want to do here is actually have our main object. So our main collection right here, we're going to have this guy own the GUI. So first thing, we're going to keep this atlas here. So we're going to just move it over so it's, you know, on screen with our new resolution. So hit W. Bring this guy over here. Now imagine this was a full screen, you know, loading screen or whatever. So this is actually going to fade out when we have our GUI up, display our GUI, and then it's going to call back to this guy. So we've got it. We're going to keep it with the name of logo. And now we're just going to go ahead and go create a new game object. And we shall rename the UI. And then we're going to load UI from file and bring in our .GUI. All right, so we now have our UI available. Next thing we want to do is just go ahead and actually add our main.script. So new Lua script. Where did script go? Lua script. So script file right here. We will call the main.script. And this is basically going to be the logic for, so we'll save that out for now. We'll attach that to our logo. So add from file, main.script. Now once again, I covered the scripting in earlier tutorials as well, so if I'm losing you a little bit, please do check earlier in the series. It's actually in the same code that I explained how to do input handling, so you know, you got a twofer there if you don't already know what I'm doing. So if I'm losing you a bit on this stuff, it's stuff that's already been covered, and I do ask you to refer to the earlier tutorials for the exactness of what's going on. But we have created a script that's going to be created when our logo object is first created, and this is actually going to control the displaying of our GUI. So now let's go ahead and actually do that. We're only going to need a couple of these methods. We're not going to use final, at least in this particular case. We're going to use onMessage, and we are going to use onInput. Yeah, and no onReload. All right, so here are our three different methods we're going to use. Now our first part is very simple. This is from Input Handling 101. Basically, when our guy is created, we want to say, yes, we do in fact get input handling, because we want to be notified when the escape key is pressed. So just message up post to ourself, acquire input focus, like so. And next up, we're going to go message.post. This is a built-in message. We're actually going to pass it to our UI game object that we just created, which I will show you again. This is this guy, so we're passing it to this guy. And what we're doing is when we create our, so when our logo is created, what it's going to do is immediately disable the UI. So the UI isn't shown, isn't getting messages, is nothing. It's just sitting there doing nothing. All right, so that's when we first start up. Now we're going to have a little bit more logic. So first off, we're going to have, okay, we'll implement that one later on. So we'll do the on input. So this is one with when our escape key is pressed. We're going to go if action underscore ID equals hash escape. So the value we set in the input map, and action dot released. Be sure to do this, otherwise this is going to fire a whole lot of times. Then, all right. So if the escape key is pressed, first thing we're going to do is send a message to our UI, and guess what? Enable it, like so. And next thing we're going to do is tell our own game object, hashtag sprite, to tint W 0.2. So basically we're going to tint it back to 20% brightness. And that's that. So we'll go ahead and save that. We'll save our main collection. And we'll go ahead and run it. There we go. So now when I hit the escape key, it shows us our UI. Now our UI doesn't actually have any logic yet, so that's the next thing we need to address. Now, a UI is controlled by a typical Lua file, but instead of being a .lua file or a .script file, it's actually a GUI underscore script file. It's the exact same thing. It just has special access to a specific namespace called GUI. So we're going to use that in a second. So all we got to do basically is go into main, go new, and create a GUI script. And we'll stay with the same naming convention. So my GUI underscore script. Again, this is just a straight up Lua file. Nothing really special going on here. But this is the code controlled by our .GUI. So when our GUI is loaded, this is going to potentially be loaded with it. Now I say potentially is because we still have to manually actually wire it up. So I go into my GUI. You'll see under the properties for the entire GUI, there's the script option. So let's go ahead and set the script to our GUI script, like so. And now it's wired up. So this script loads along with that .GUI file. Now let's go on back to our script and let's do some code. Again, we want to handle input for this guy. We're going to be handling mouse clicks. So we go message.post to ourself, acquire input focus, like so. And no final, no update, but we do have a message. So basically we are going to listen here for the enabled message. So if message underscore ID equals hash enable. So if we get told to turn on, then this is probably a little redundant. Actually, this one is probably redundant because of what we're doing here in the order of flow, but I'm being consistent with my execution. We're just going to go ahead and basically acquire input focus when we enable it again. When you disable it, automatically loses input focus, so there is a little bit of redundancy going on with this process, but I figure I should be as absolute as I can. And also, speaking of redundancy, this is to show you how that GUI namespace works. What we're going to do is just go ahead and set the text. Oops. Set text. So that's a special method of the GUI namespace, and this is only available in GUI underscore scripts. So we're going to set the text of GUI dot, another one of the GUI namespace, get node named text. So basically, for that particular node, set its text value to click me, and that should be it. All right. So basically, when it gets the message to enable, it basically just grabs input focus again and resets its text back to click me. Now in on input, we are going to handle the left click function. So basically, if someone left clicks on this guy, we want to go ahead and do something. So if action underscore ID equals hash left click, left click like so, and action.released equals true. Then, so if they left clicked, first thing we're going to do is get a reference to the box. This is the outer layer, so you don't just click on the text, you want to click on the entire button containing it. So let's use the GUI.getNode function again to get a reference to it. And it was called box, like so. And now if GUI.pick_node box, let's see, action.x, action.y. So what this is basically doing is saying at the coordinates of this current click, of this x and y coordinate with this node, do they intersect? And that's what that check does. Again, that GUI namespace is coming in handy. Then, so basically this is basically saying if our click is within our box's coordinates, now what we want to do is change our text back. So local.text equals GUI.get node box. This part is entirely superfluous because we're actually going to immediately hide our UI as soon as it's clicked. So you're not seeing the text has changed, but I do want to show you how you can go ahead and interact with the dynamic properties of your UI, which is why we're doing this here. So if we didn't hide the UI, you would see that the clicking is in fact happening and the text is changing. All right, so get node, text, not box. So get reference to our label, GUI.set text clicked. So, I need to pass in a reference to our text object actually set, like so. Message.post disable. So shut down. Message.post. Again, this one is probably superfluous because I believe this is automatically done by the disabling of something, but you know, let's be thorough here. So we're going to get rid of input focus just in case. And this last little bit is what we're going to do is pass a message back to logo, which was this guy. So basically back to this script that called into here in the first place. So this is how you can communicate between the UI layer and your script layer, is by message passing, just like everything else. We're just going to send it a message called done UI. And that is that. And I think that is it for my code. Hopefully I didn't make any errors, but now we need to handle this done UI messaging. So we're just going to head on back over to main.script. In our on message, we'll check for it. If message underscore ID equals hash quote done UI, then in here all we want to do is just go ahead and set our sprite component tint back to 100%. Done. We'll now see if I made any typos. Let's go ahead and run our code. All right, so there is our project. If I go ahead and I press escape, our UI is shown and you'll see that our background is dimmed out. I go ahead and click the button and we're shown again. And really that's it. We hit escape, bring the UI back up, and done. So that is implementing a very, very, very simple UI in the Defold engine and how you can communicate between them, how the GUI namespace works, etc. So all the basics you need to know are there and covered. Now you'll notice if you go back to the .GUI, there's a lot more that we're not dealing with here. There's layers, there's different layouts, there's so you can handle for different devices, different profiles, landscape, portrait, that kind of stuff. We can come on back over here. When we look at our nodes, you'll see there was a lot of other options such as anchoring, pivoting, adjustment modes for how to scale up to different devices, etc. So there's a lot more in there about resolution independence that we are not covering at all. And also that's where layers come in. Layers are the ability to put things on top of and below other things. So basically your Z coordinate within the GUI system, and we didn't cover that at all either. But you do have the workflow down, so you should be able to make this work to your specific devices as you see fit. So I hope you found that useful. This is probably the last of the hands-on nuts and bolts stuff for the Defold engine. We've covered basically everything I think you really need to know, except for maybe how to put it all together to make a small game. So all the nuts and bolts tutorials are now done. This series is pretty much done, unless I do a wrap-up mini-series of basically putting it together to create a game. However, if I did miss an area of the Defold game engine, gaping area, do let me know, and I will make a tutorial on it. But in my mind, we're pretty much at the end of the road here. I hope you did find that useful. If you did, of course, please do click like, and we do this kind of stuff all the time. So if you are interested in game development related tutorials, reviews, news, you name it, we got it. So do maybe click subscribe, check us out. All right, see you all later. Goodbye.